Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly Hebrew word study. Today we are in 1 Samuel chapter 20, and this is a very strange chapter. As you read this, you may struggle, as did the Jewish commentators and sages, as to the place and setting of this chapter. This chapter has many nuances of it, of things that are difficult to comprehend, um, because the way the whole chapter reads out just doesn't fit in with the rest of the chapters. It gives the impression that Jonathan didn't know that Saul was trying to kill David. Um, it starts out very interesting. Remember last week we had just a beautiful study on David residing at Naoth, and the Spirit of the Lord was there. Samuel was there. The prophets were there. Saul sent his messengers to gather David, and they were overcome by the Spirit of the Lord. Three times, three different groups of soldiers and messengers came to take David. I assume that they were armed and they were strong men, ready to capture David and bring David back so that he could suffer demise at the hand of Saul. And those three attempts were overcome by God's presence, and Saul finally came himself and was overcome by the Spirit of the Lord. And I would have thought David would have stayed there. I mean, it seemed obvious that God was providing a protective environment for David. Samuel was there. The Spirit of God was there. Why would David ever want to leave until he received direction from God to do so? So this is strange to me. None of the commentators make any reference to that, but it certainly stood out to me. But they did say that this whole chapter seems out of place. So as we read through here, I just want to point out a couple things because, again, we know there's value in every portion of what is written as God's word. And so there's something here I want to share with you that resonated with me. So David fled from where the presence of God was, where Saul was, and he went back to Gibeah, where Jonathan was and where Saul lived, which again seems very strange. But he reunites with Jonathan, who was his best friend, and basically said, I don't know why all this is happening. Why is your father wanting to kill me? I haven't sinned against them. What have I done wrong? And Jonathan says, no, you're not going to die. My father will do nothing unless he tells me. And, again, Jonathan seems oblivious to what is going on here. So we get to verse 3, and I think it's very interesting just to point out the word vayishava is to take an oath. But remember, one of the previous lessons we looked at it, and this is really the word for seven, and that taking an oath was to repeat something seven times to emphasize it. And so this word that became translated as to swear, as in taking an oath, not as in saying bad words, but to make an oath, was emphasized by the root word of coming from sevens, of doing something seven times. And so he took an oath with David, again, very solemn, very serious time. And, there's just this exchange back and forth of how they interact between themselves. And so they set up what's going to be a little test. David is obviously not going back to the palace, but Jonathan's going to go and he's going to try to find out the real intentions of his father. Again, previous chapters that we went through, there should be no question at all what Saul's intentions were for David, and Jonathan was there. The commentators have a very tough time explaining this chapter. Some of them say that, well, maybe Jonathan just had a change of heart. Maybe he thought his dad just had a few moments of bipolar episode or insanity, but that there were maybe some softening of the ways there, or softening of his heart after maybe after he had his encounter with the prophets and the Spirit of God. We really don't know. But we do know that there's value in what we're going to see here today. So this whole thing is being set up about coming to the dinner at the new moon. David's not going to show up. Will Saul miss him? And what will his situation be? And so they create this little story that they're going to tell of that David's going to go to Bethlehem. I don't, it's obviously not truthful. It's just he didn't go there. So again, interesting in the Bible that you will find lies being told and deceitfulness being told. And in Christianity, we have a really hard time with that. Um, Surprising enough, Judaism does not have any problem with that because they look at the value um, that a life is being saved. And so to tell something like this to be deceitful when it's not for your own benefit is not, in their mind, considered breaking a commandment because you're doing a higher order of saving a life, and it's not a um, selfish act, it's an unselfish act. And so again, very different how Judaism looks at it versus Christianity. And I won't try to sway you one way or the other. I'll leave that with you to consider how you want to process that. But we do see it happen here. We see it happen many times throughout the scriptures where um, falsehoods are being told to save a life. Excuse me. And so we see that here with David, as it's been replicated many times throughout the Bible prior to this. So they have this covenant, they have this little thing going on here where David's going to hide in the field, and a message is going to be given to David from Jonathan. And so they went out into the field and make this pact between them. And what's interesting here, what resonates with me, is the use of the word three, or the use of the word here, the third day. Again, in the Hebrew commentating realm, there's no mention of this whatsoever, but I couldn't help but feel that there's some um, shadows here of the third day, and actually Jesus being a similitude in many ways of David, or David being a similitude of Jesus as the Messiah. Many references that they had some very similar things that overlap. The Psalms speak very heavily in Messianic prophecy. Um, I just think it's not a coincidence that, they wanted David to be, he said, David, stay out in the field for 3 days, hide behind this rock for 3 days. Why did it have to be 3 days? Why couldn't it have been one day? Why is David hiding behind a rock? Again, a lot of could be a similarity to Jesus being in a tomb for 3 days. Is kind of where my heart was feeling this had an indication to. We find that there are three arrows that are used, that are shot on the side of the rock to convey this message. Um, Again, a lot of types and shadows that really curious as to why this had to play out the way it did. But as we know, they made this covenant. Um, we see here that Saul goes berserk when he finds out that David isn't there. And David is hiding in the field behind this big rock for 3 days. And so what's interesting too is that the name of this stone, you're going to see it here at the end of verse 19. And what's interesting here is if we just look at it, Hamakom Asher Nistarachta Sham Bayom Hamaaseh Vayashavta Etzel, which again is a very similar sound to the word for stone. So it's Etzel ha'even ha'azel is how would go in the Hebrew. So there's some rhyming there. Ezel ha'aven ha'azel. And the word for stone here, why would this stone have a name? It's really strange that this stone was a monument of some sort, but there's no commentating as to what this stone meant, but yet the stone has a name. And when we look up the name of the stone, we click on this H237. It comes up as Ezel, but what's important here are the three root letters of the Aleph, the Zion, and the Lamed. And when I look this up in Samson Raphael Hirsch's Dictionary of Hebrew Etymology, it mentions that this has a root of meaning to go away or to disappear, which, again, thinking along the same lines of what happened at Jesus's tomb, the stone was rolled away and he had disappeared. He wasn't there. He had gone away. Um, again, is this a type or shadow? I don't think you'll find anybody with any Bible commentary that would support this. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's just what I feel in my spirit that this chapter, which has no real need to be there, it doesn't cover any new ground. It doesn't say anything that hasn't been already said, except for this episode, except for these 3 days that David hid behind a rock. Why did he have to stay out there 3 days? Why were there 3 arrows that were shot on the side of the rock to communicate when it was only Jonathan and his armor bearer? Jonathan could have ran right up and grabbed David and talked to him and told him the arrows meant nothing unless it has some correlation to um, prophetic events that are yet to come, Messianic prophecy. The name of the stone meaning to disappear, finding that this word is only used one time in all of the Bible, here in this occurrence, a very unique word, and that it has that word of disappearing. You'll also see that if you look at on the Day of Atonement, that there was a name for the scapegoat, for the goat that was sent out with the sins of the people on. That was also named Azel. Um, I'm not sure if it had Aleph or Ayin in front of it, but it had the same three consonant sound to it. Again, is there a connection there? Jesus being the lamb slain for the foundation of the world, being the scapegoat, if you will, that the sins were passed upon. Just a lot of beautiful possibilities here. Is it ever going to find its way into a commentating book somewhere? Probably never, but it does resonate with my spirit that God's word has so many beautiful depths and insights to it. And down here on this earth, we'll never know all what it contains, but one day when we're with Him, we will know these things. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if this was a messianic prophecy put in here just to uh, pique our pick our spirits and pique our attention to know that God has a plan. He has many ways to reveal that plan. He has many ways to share that plan, and maybe this is one of them. So, all right, God bless you. I hope you enjoyed this little way off base target, if you will, from what many would ascribe to. But I pray it's an encouragement to you as it has been to me. So God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.